Hey, what's up, guys? Hey, it's good to be back with you again. I wanted to talk about something that some of you might enjoy and some of you actually might not know anything about at all. This is the topic of old broadcasts of baseball games on the radio as originally broadcast. So back in the good old days, back when I was, I don't know how old I was. Maybe I was like 10, 11, 12, something like that. Back after J. Richard Seitz had passed away, so I must have been about 10 or 11, the APBA catalog had an advertisement one day by a company that was called Danrick Enterprises. I remember this well because this is back when the idea of other companies advertising their services in the APBA catalog was a little bit odd. I mean, APBA had never, to my knowledge, ever done any sort of tie-in with any other company. And all of a sudden you had this thing that was advertised there with a whole bunch of radio broadcasts of old baseball games. I remember being very, very interested in that, and my dad was as well, because there was a 1936 White Sox game that was listed, and so we ended up getting that one. I think the price back then was about $15 or something. We got it on 2 cassette tapes, and that's where the collecting started. So it's a very, very interesting type hobby, especially since there's so many games out there, right? I've done it for years. It's actually been years since I was really, really active. I would say my biggest period of activity in collecting these probably was around like the 2011 to about 2015 era, something like that. And I got quite a few of these. In earlier eras, I've traded with other people. I've collected things and have mostly looked at these games not on cassette tape, but on MP3. There are some of these you can find on YouTube, and some of them you can find on the Internet Archive, but not quite everything is available, unfortunately. Some of them, too, by the way, are only available through the NPIII collection. I wanted to give you just sort of a real quick overview and a quick look at this, and then we'll talk about some of the stuff that I know and that I've experienced here as time has gone on. First thing that I know, though, is that this hobby, as you look, this is the folder that I have, which is going to look really small for you. I apologize for that. I'm not certain that I can actually make this any bigger. The first thing you're going to notice is that anyway, there's a number of games that are out there, and a lot of them are of certain vintage and are quite old, right? So the oldest game that at least I'm aware of that's complete is the original broadcast of the 1934 All-Star Game. There's also a 34 Yankees-Tigers game that I don't think comes from the same source, a number of 34 World Series games, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of stuff out there. In terms of the total amount of like games that are out there, say like before, I don't know, 1993 or something like that, probably in excess of 3,000, though I would say the majority are from about 1977, 1978, and around that era when other people would collect. Now, I know that collecting this stuff is not actually a huge hobby. Once you get into it, it's pretty easy to figure out who the main players are. You learn that a lot of guys who collect this stuff are kind of audio purists, and so what they really want is they want to have audio tapes and or they want to have audio of games that's of the highest possible quality. That's definitely not what we have here. Again, it's not going to be very, very easy for you to see this, but we have games here like the 34 All-Star games, about a 46 megabyte file for an MP3 that lasts probably like 2.5 hours. This is a 34 megabyte file, 33, 38, and so on and so forth. A couple of other things you should know. So the way that this was put together, I've kind of understood this a little bit as time has gone on, especially as I've talked with different people who happen to be in the hobby and happen to be in the know. It seems that a lot of these original recordings come from transcript or radio, so transcription discs of radio broadcasts. So, you could have, I suppose, tape, although I don't know much about the history of tape and how much tape was used in, 1934. That's pretty early. I'm pretty sure that whatever tape was being used at that time to record was probably largely happening in Germany, not in the United States. But a lot of these broadcasts, especially these World Series broadcasts, because they were made using transcription discs, end up having a lot of skipping going on within them. Somebody told me, there was a rumor that it may have been Kennesaw Mountain Landis, the commissioner of baseball, who was recording this to make sure that nobody on the station said anything bad about him. While I think that might be the case, I'm not certain that that's true. I've read books that say no, it's a little bit different. Actually, the real thing that was happening is, there was a desire by the Hall of Fame at that time to have some of this stuff on stock. Anyway, I don't know the reason fully, but I do know that we have a number of World Series games from 34, 35. For 36, for some reason, we have a whole bunch of broadcasts of Chicago White Sox games, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games in a row, and then there's also a Cubs game that was broadcast. These are a lot of fun. It's actually more fun to listen to than the World Series games because it gives you an idea of what broadcasts really were like back then, including things like what kind of interviews you'd have before the games and all sorts of stuff like that. Cardinals and Cubs, and then you have a whole bunch here. I mean, there's just a lot. There's so much going on here that it's kind of hard to figure out even where to get into it. Some of the stuff here is of significant historical interest. For example, I mean, we have the Game 4 of the 1941 World Series, which is the game that the Dodgers lost after winning it when Strike 3 was dropped by Mickey Owen. We've got other games of interest that people probably don't know about, like the 1942 Service All-Star game, which I believe was a night game, if I remember that one right. And there's a lot of talk about having to end that one a little bit early, and on it goes. You'll notice, and a lot of people have this stuff already, I know. You'll notice if you go through at least my collection that everything kind of stops after 1945. I'm trying to remember when Landis passed away. I think it was 1946. So there may be some truth to this story that these were only recorded for his sake. Like, for example, the 1947 World Series, I'm not aware of anything being out there. I'm not aware of anything existing. We do have the full 48-49 World Series. The 1950 World Series, we only have partial copies of these games. I believe these are partial. Let's go take a look here at the properties and see if it's going to tell me how long the audio is. Yeah, 1 hour, 39 minutes is probably half a game. And this one I think is also going to be partial. Yeah, 1 hour, 26 minutes, right? So this is Byron Sam, who was the Phillies broadcaster. The whoever made the recording apparently only recorded his half of the games, although I think that also is a little bit questionable. Anyway, the reason why I know things about what has been happening in this industry, in part, is because the guy who was running Dan Rick Enterprises, Charlie Schwartzbod, and I had email correspondence for a number of years, and I asked him a bunch of questions about where things came from, and among other things, he had different sources for games than some other people did. And my understanding from him, among other things, is that there are actually more games out there than people are fully aware of. There's probably quite a bit of stuff that will eventually come trickling out, and we will see. Some of this stuff is television audio. 1952 World Series Game 6 and 7 have been out for quite some time. You can find those easily on YouTube, and you can listen. This is the television audio. I don't think that there's a radio broadcast of that stuff available. So other stuff that people probably don't know exists. Almost every game of the 1955 World Series is out there. We're missing Game 1 and Game 4. And then for the 1956 World Series, we have also almost every game, although Game 5 is a sort of a hodgepodge of different sources that were kind of strung together. So there's some stuff that you learn as you take the time to get into this, right? You may recall that that 1956 Don Larson World Series game, Game 5, was released. Oh, man, how many years ago was this? I'm thinking I was in China at the time. This would have been about 15 years ago. You'll remember that aired on Baseball Network. I'm pretty sure you can find that on YouTube as well. And there's a lot of talk about, it's so amazing that we found this complete game and all this stuff. Yeah, those of us who were in this part of the hobby, I think, knew that the video copy of the game existed because of this patched together version of it that we had for the radio broadcast, which consists of, I think, 3 different sources kind of put together into one. Because they had to cover up little gaps and little problems that happened. So that's kind of the point. There's a lot of this stuff that's kind of floating around. A whole ton of this stuff is not under any sort of copyright or anything like that. Because of its age, and it's just basically whoever has the recording kind of has the recording. It's pretty neat. It's fun to listen to. I will warn you that especially the early stuff from the 30s can be hard to listen to, in part because it's a record, so you will hear different audio that repeats. and you'll be thinking to yourself, man, somebody needs to like clean the stylus or clean the disc or something like that. Yeah, it's an unfortunate thing. It is just kind of the way that it is. That's the way the records are. And it wasn't, at least these copies that I have were not really edited by anybody at all, though they probably should be. Maybe somebody can sit down and try to fix it up a little bit. And the other thing that is much more difficult to get used to is the original style of broadcasting baseball, which was very, very low on stories, very, very high on describing action, and especially in 1934, consisted of broadcasters missing things that they should have been talking about. So yeah, it wasn't necessarily perfect, right? When we're talking about, Vin Scully and John Miller and, like some of the truly all-time greatest broadcasters, especially on the radio, there's a reason why those guys are extremely good. And if you go back and you listen to earlier broadcasts, you'll notice that it's not quite the same, right? Scully in particular had that ability to, make the story sound interesting and to sort of change the cadence of his voice and to make it sound like it's something that, everybody was interested in, and we could all sit down together and listen to the storyteller weave his tale for us. That's not what happens in these 1934 broadcasts. I mean, if you haven't listened to them before, you're kind of in for a surprise to know what it was really like. It's a lot more like a news broadcast, and there's a lot of sort of surprise about what happens, and then there are major problems with audio level balancing and stuff. It's a hoot. It's a riot. It's a lot of fun to go back and listen to, right? Especially from modern ears. So anyway, interesting stuff. One reason why I bring this up, of course, is because if you are a paying member to my blog, you can have access to my entire radio collection. So if you're interested in this and you're unaware of a lot of this stuff, or you don't know this stuff is out there and you think it might be kind of fun, a little bit of incentive for you to come on. I know a lot of this stuff you can get like for free from other sources, right? But if you happen to want to subscribe my work, if you're interested in my blog and the things that we write, I'm not going to make any of the articles pay only, but you might get access to some extra stuff like this here and there. And anyway, that's just about it for me for this video. I'd be very interested in knowing if you also are interested in this, or especially if you collect this stuff. I'm always on the lookout for collectors. So my audio is not great quality. This is not what they would consider to be like trading quality. I'm not an audiophile. I don't have like fancy speakers and all this stuff, right? This is mostly like you can listen to it, right? You're driving the car, you want to listen to an old game, here's an old game, and you could listen to it, and it is acceptable. That's kind of the level we're going for here. But yeah, if you're really into this, you have stuff to trade and stuff, let me know. Like I said, all of my stuff is online already, right? And you can get copies of it. Just let me know, and yeah, we'll hook up. And if you don't know anything about this stuff, you should come check it out. It's pretty cool, actually. It's you might be surprised at how much fun it is. That's it for me, and I'll talk with you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.